Ambassador Sarah Chun stood before the towering crystalline structure that housed the Galactic Council, her hands trembling with barely contained rage. The morning sun of Nexus Prime cast long shadows across the plaza, where thousands of beings from across the galaxy had gathered to witness what many believed would be humanity's final plea for justice. For 3 centuries, humans had played by the Council's rules. They had submitted to countless inspections of their military capabilities, accepted trade restrictions that crippled their economy, and endured the constant surveillance of their colonies. All because the Council deemed humanity too aggressive to be trusted with full galactic citizenship. Sarah remembered her grandfather's stories about the early days of human expansion into space. Back then, humanity had been eager, hopeful, ready to join the galactic community as equals. They had discovered faster-than-light travel independently, something only 12 other species had achieved in the galaxy's recorded history. Yet instead of being welcomed, they were met with suspicion and fear. The Zephyrian delegation had been most vocal about humanity's warlike nature. They pointed to Earth's history of conflicts, the nuclear weapons, the countless wars that had shaped human civilization. What they failed to understand was that those very conflicts had forged humanity into something stronger, something that could survive and adapt in ways other species never could. The council chambers hummed with alien voices speaking in languages that had existed long before humanity had learned to make fire. Sarah walked through the corridor lined with statues of the founding members, their alien forms carved from metals that didn't exist in Earth's periodic table. Each statue represented a species that had helped establish the peaceful galactic order that humanity had been struggling to find its place in. As Sarah entered the main chamber, she was greeted by the sight of the Council's high arbiters seated on their elevated platform. The Vorthack representative, its tentacles writhing with what Sarah had learned to recognize as contempt, was already speaking about humanity's latest transgression. The crime this time was defending a human colony from raiders. The colony of New Olympia had been attacked by Krelin pirates, and the human defense forces had responded with what the Council deemed excessive force. They had destroyed the pirate fleet completely, leaving no survivors. According to the Council's laws, this was considered an act of genocide, punishable by the complete isolation of humanity from galactic society. Sarah had seen the recordings of New Olympia after the attack. Entire settlements burned to ash, families slaughtered, children taken as slaves to be sold in the Outer Rim markets. The human response had been swift and decisive. Admiral Marcus Webb had led a fleet of 12 ships against the 40-vessel pirate armada and had emerged victorious without losing a single human life. But the Council saw only the death toll of the raiders. They couldn't understand that sometimes violence was not just necessary, but the only moral response to evil. They had spent so long in their comfortable peace that they had forgotten what it meant to fight for something worth dying for. The ethereal council member, a being of pure energy contained within a crystalline shell, spoke in its haunting voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Humanity continues to demonstrate its inability to resolve conflicts through peaceful means. The destruction of the Krelin fleet was unnecessary. Negotiation should have been attempted. Sarah felt her jaw clench. How do you negotiate with beings who had just finished murdering innocent families? How do you find common ground with slavers and murderers? But she had learned long ago that such arguments fell on deaf ears in these chambers. The trial proceeded as Sarah had expected it would. Evidence of the Krelin atrocities was dismissed as irrelevant. Testimony from survivors who begged for protection was deemed emotional manipulation. The fact that the raiders had been operating in human space, attacking human civilians, seemed to carry no weight with the Council. What truly shocked Sarah was the revelation that came during the afternoon session. The Krelin raids hadn't been random acts of piracy. They had been sanctioned by 3 council member species who had grown tired of human expansion into what they considered their territories. The raids were meant to teach humanity a lesson about respecting galactic boundaries. The evidence was undeniable. Communications between Krelin commanders and their council sponsors' payment records, even strategic planning documents that showed how the attacks were meant to cripple human morale and force them to abandon their outer colonies. When Sarah presented this evidence, expecting it to change everything, the Council's response was what finally broke something fundamental in humanity's relationship with galactic civilization. High Arbiter Zelthan, a massive insectoid being whose species had controlled galactic trade routes for millennia, dismissed the evidence with a wave of its claw. The methods used to obtain this intelligence violated 17 galactic privacy laws, Zelthan declared. Humanity's espionage activities are equally concerning as their military aggression. Sarah stared at the High Arbiter in disbelief. They had provided proof of a conspiracy to commit genocide against human civilians, and the Council's response was to condemn humanity for uncovering the plot. The chamber fell silent as Sarah realized that this was never going to be about justice. It was about power, about keeping humanity in its place. The Council didn't want peace, they wanted submission. They didn't fear human aggression, they feared human independence. Standing before the assembled representatives of galactic civilization, Sarah made a choice that would echo through history. She removed the small silver pin from her lapel, the symbol of humanity's membership in the Galactic Council, and placed it on the speaker's podium. Humanity formally withdraws from the Galactic Council, she announced, her voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. We came here seeking justice and found only corruption. We offered peace and received betrayal. We accepted your rules and discovered they were designed to destroy us. The chamber erupted into chaos. Representatives from dozens of species began speaking at once, their voices creating a cacophony of alien languages that filled the air like the sound of breaking glass. Sarah continued, speaking over the noise, her words being broadcast to every human colony across the galaxy. For 300 years, we have tried to be what you wanted us to be. We have restrained our nature, limited our growth, and accepted humiliation after humiliation in the name of galactic peace. Today, that ends. High Arbiter Zelthan raised itself to its full impressive height, its mandibles clicking with anger. You cannot simply withdraw from galactic civilization, human. There are consequences for such actions. Your species will be isolated, cut off from galactic trade and technology. You will be alone in the dark. Sarah smiled, and there is something in that expression that made several nearby representatives step back instinctively. You seem to misunderstand something fundamental about humans, she said quietly. We have never been afraid of the dark. We were born in it, shaped by it. While your species were developing in comfortable environments with perfect conditions, humanity crawled out of caves and conquered a world that was actively trying to kill us every single day. She paused, looking around the chamber at the assembled aliens who had spent the day trying to destroy her species' future. You think isolation will weaken us? Earth was isolated for millions of years, and we used that time to become something that could challenge the universe itself. You think cutting us off from your technology will cripple us? We invented faster-than-light travel without your help. We built our civilization from nothing but determination and the refusal to give up. The Vorthack representative's tentacles writhed with what Sarah now recognized as fear rather than contempt. You speak of war, human. The Council has military forces that dwarf your pathetic fleet. I'm not speaking of war, Sarah replied. I'm speaking of evolution. You've spent so long in your comfortable alliance that you've forgotten what it takes to survive in a hostile universe. You've grown soft, dependent on systems that require cooperation and trust. Humanity never had that luxury. She began walking toward the exit, her footsteps echoing in the suddenly quiet chamber. We try to play by your rules, but you made it clear that those rules were never meant for us. So now we'll play by ours. As Sarah reached the door, she turned back one final time. You wanted to know what happens when humans abandon peace. You're about to find out. The journey back to the human embassy was a blur of activity. Within hours of Sarah's declaration, every human diplomatic mission in Council space was preparing for immediate evacuation. The message was spreading across the galactic communications network faster than even Sarah had anticipated. Admiral Webb was already waiting when Sarah arrived at the embassy. His weathered face showed none of the concern that other human officials were displaying. If anything, he looked relieved. "About damn time," he said simply. "How long do we have before they try to stop us from leaving?" "They won't try to stop us," Sarah replied. "That would be an act of war, and they're not ready for that. Not yet. They still think they can control the situation through economic pressure and political isolation." She was wrong about that, but the mistake wouldn't become apparent for several more hours. The first sign of trouble came when human ships trying to leave Council space were suddenly surrounded by what the Council called safety escorts, but which were clearly military vessels. The escorts claimed they were simply ensuring safe passage through Council territory, but their weapons were powered, and their behavior was anything but peaceful. When a human freighter New Horizon attempted to refuse its escort, the Council ships opened fire without warning. The freighter was destroyed with all hands, including 300 civilians who had simply been trying to return home. The message was clear: humanity could withdraw from the Council, but they would not be allowed to leave alive. The news of the New Horizons' destruction reached Admiral Webb while he was still coordinating the evacuation of human civilians from Council space. The bridge of his flagship, the U.S. Retribution, fell into deadly silence as the communications officer finished reading the report. 300 souls, families, traders, scientists, children, vaporized without warning while trying to exercise their basic right to leave a place that no longer wanted them. Webb had served in the human fleet for 43 years. He had fought pirates, explored unknown systems, and defended human colonies from everything from alien predators to stellar phenomena. But he had never felt the cold rage that now settled into his bones like winter frost. "Admiral," his communications officer called out, voice tight with controlled emotion. "We're receiving similar reports from 17 other evacuation convoys. Council forces are calling it preventive security measures, but they're not letting anyone leave." Webb looked at the tactical display showing human ships scattered across Council space. Hundreds of vessels, thousands of human lives, all now trapped in what amounted to the largest hostage situation in galactic history. The Council had made their position clear. Humanity could withdraw from their organization, but they would not be permitted to withdraw their people. The fleet that surrounded Webb's task force was impressive by any standard. 47 Council warships representing 12 different species, all arrayed in perfect formation as if they were conducting a military parade rather than an act of piracy. Their weapons were powered but not yet targeted, a clear message that violence would only come if humans chose to resist. Captain Martinez, Webb's chief of staff, approached with a data pad containing intercept from Council communications. "Sir, they're coordinating this from Nexus Prime itself. High Command is calling it Operation Gentle Restraint. The official line is that they're protecting human civilians from the dangers of traveling through potentially hostile space without Council protection." Webb almost laughed at the absurdity. The most dangerous thing in this part of space was currently the Council fleet itself. But he understood the political game being played. The Council needed to appear reasonable to the galactic community while effectively holding humanity hostage until they agreed to return to their previous submissive position. "What's our current fleet strength?" Webb asked, though he already knew the numbers weren't promising. 38 ships in our immediate task force," Martinez replied. "Another 74 scattered throughout Council space in various evacuation operations. Total firepower advantage goes to the Council forces by approximately 3-1. Webb nodded grimly. Those numbers would have been discouraging to most military commanders. But Webb had spent decades studying human military history, and he knew that disadvantage often bred innovation. Humanity's greatest victories had come when they were outnumbered, outgunned, and backed against the wall. The communication channel crackled to life, and the arrogant voice of High Arbiter Zell then filled the bridge. "Admiral Webb, You will order your ships to power down their weapons and prepare to be escorted back to designated human territories. Any attempt to resist will be interpreted as an act of aggression against galactic peace. Webb looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. These were men and women who had volunteered to serve humanity's interests in space. They had families, dreams, futures that extended far beyond this moment. But he also saw something else in their expressions. The same cold determination that had carried their ancestors through ice ages, world wars, and the countless other challenges that had forged humanity into what it was. "Admiral," his weapons officer asked quietly, "your orders?" Webb thought about Ambassador Chen's words at the council trial, about how humanity had tried for 3 centuries to be what the galaxy wanted them to be, about how they had restrained their nature and accepted humiliation in the name of peace, about how that time was now over. "Open a channel to all human ships in council space," Webb commanded. The communications officer's hands flew over his console. "Channel open, sir. You're broadcasting to all human vessels." Webb took a deep breath, knowing that his next words would either save his people or damn them all. "This is Admiral Marcus Webb, commanding the human evacuation fleet. 3 hours ago, our diplomatic representatives formally withdrew humanity from the Galactic Council. Since that time, Council forces have murdered 300 human civilians and declared their intention to hold the rest of us hostage until we agree to return to our previous status as second-class galactic citizens." He paused, looking at the tactical display showing the overwhelming enemy forces arrayed against them. "I want every human in council space to understand our situation clearly. We are outnumbered, outgunned, and surrounded. The easy choice would be to surrender, accept our captivity, and hope that eventually the council might allow us to leave. But humanity has never been known for making easy choices. Across the fleet, on bridges, and in crew quarters, in cargo holds, and engine rooms, thousands of humans listened to their admiral's words and made their own choice about what kind of species they wanted to be. The council believes that humans are naturally aggressive, that we can't be trusted with the responsibilities of galactic citizenship. They've spent 3 centuries trying to prove that point, creating situations designed to make us fail to justify their prejudices. Today, they're going to discover that they were right about one thing. When you threaten human lives, when you murder our civilians, when you try to hold us prisoner, we do indeed become very aggressive. Webb's voice hardened. "All ships, this is your last chance to surrender if you choose. I will not order any human to die today. But for those who choose to stay, remember that we're not just fighting for our own lives. We're fighting for every human child who will grow up knowing that their species bent the knee to bullies and murderers. We're fighting for the right to exist as free beings in this galaxy." The response came back from across the fleet in a chorus of human voices. "Standing with you, Admiral. Ready for orders. Let's show them what humans can do." Captain Martinez pulled up the fleet tactical analysis. "Sir, even with every human ship at maximum combat efficiency, the math doesn't work. We can't win a straight fight." "You're absolutely right," Webb agreed, "which is why we're not going to fight fair." What happened next would be studied in military academies for generations. Webb didn't order a frontal assault against superior forces. Instead, he did something that the Council's tactical computers hadn't predicted. He ordered every human ship to scatter in different directions simultaneously. The Council fleet, trained in conventional galactic warfare, attempted to maintain their formation while pursuing multiple targets. Their coordination protocols, designed for cooperative battles against external threats, became a liability when dealing with an enemy that refused to fight according to established rules. The human ships, meanwhile, had spent decades learning to operate independently. Every captain knew how to make decisions without waiting for orders from high command. Every crew had trained for scenarios where they might be cut off from support and forced to survive on their own. The UES Defiance, commanded by Captain Sarah Okafor, was one of the first to break through the Council lines. Her ship was a converted freighter with minimal weapons, but Okafor had served in the Merchant Marine before joining the fleet. She knew how to make a ship do things it was never designed to do. As Council forces converged on her position, Okafor ordered her ship to perform a gravity slingshot maneuver around Nexus Prime's largest moon. The pursuing Council ships, heavier and less maneuverable, couldn't match the dangerous course correction. 3 of them were caught by the moon's gravity field and forced to abort pursuit to avoid collision. Similar scenes played out across the system as human ships used their smaller size and desperate creativity to escape situations that should have been impossible. The Council forces found themselves chasing shadows, their superior firepower useless against enemies who refused to stand and fight. But Admiral Webb's ship, the Retribution, didn't run. Instead, he ordered his vessel to position itself directly between the largest concentration of Council forces and the evacuation convoy carrying civilian refugees from the Centauri colonies. The Zephyrian commander, Admiral Thexkar, clearly expected Webb to retreat once he realized the hopelessness of his situation. Instead, the human admiral opened a direct communication channel. "Admiral Thexkar," Webb said calmly, "I have a proposition for you." The alien commander's voice crackled with confidence. "You are in no position to negotiate, human. Surrender now, and your civilians will be treated according to galactic law. The same galactic law that justified murdering 300 innocents an hour ago." Webb asked, "I think we'll pass. Here's my counteroffer. You let the civilian convoy pass, and I'll give you something you wanted for 3 centuries. "And what is that?" Webb smiled grimly. "A demonstration of exactly how dangerous humans can be when we stop trying to be civilized." The Retribution was humanity's newest and most advanced warship, incorporating technology that had been developed in secret over the past decade. While the Council had been focused on restricting human military growth through their inspection treaties, they had missed the research happening in deep space, in hidden facilities far from galactic oversight. When Webb gave the order to fire, the Retribution's weapons systems performed far beyond what the Council's intelligence estimates had predicted. The primary cannon, based on technology reverse-engineered from ancient human railguns, accelerated projectiles to relativistic speeds. The impact on the lead Zephyrian cruiser was catastrophic, splitting the massive vessel in half despite its advanced shielding. But the real surprise came when the Council forces attempted to return fire. The Retribution's defensive systems didn't just deflect incoming energy weapons. They absorbed the energy and redirected it back at the attackers. Within minutes, the human ship had turned the Council's own firepower against them. Admiral Thexkar's voice returned, no longer confident. "What kind of weapon is that?" "These technologies violate 17 galactic warfare conventions." "Funny thing about those conventions," Webb replied as a ship systematically destroyed 2 more Council vessels. "They were written by species who thought they would always have the technological advantage. They never considered what might happen if someone developed weapons they couldn't understand." The tide of the battle was turning, but Webb knew it couldn't last. His ship was powerful, but it was still just one vessel against an entire fleet. Already, Council reinforcements were jumping into the system. Even with their technological surprises, humanity was still outnumbered by too large a margin. But Webb had achieved his primary objective. The civilian convoy had used the distraction to escape Council space, carrying with them detailed recordings of the day's events. The galaxy would see exactly what the Council was willing to do to maintain their power over humanity. As his ship took damage from the concentrated fire of a dozen Council vessels, Webb opened one final communication to the human fleet. "All ships disengage and retreat to Rally Point Alpha. Mission accomplished. Let the galaxy see what we're capable of when we're pushed too far." The surviving human ships scattered into hyperspace, leaving behind them the wreckage of 7 Council vessels and the beginning of a war that would reshape galactic civilization. Webb's ship was the last to leave, her hull scarred but her crew intact. In the aftermath, as the Council assessed their losses, High Arbiter Zeldin realized they had made a critical error. They had wanted to demonstrate human aggression to justify their oppression, but instead, they had demonstrated human capability. The weapons technologies the humans had revealed should not have been possible given their supposed technological limitations. More disturbing was the tactical analysis of the human retreat. Every ship had escaped according to a coordinated plan that had been implemented without any apparent communication between vessels. The level of preparation and training required for such coordination suggested that humanity had been planning for this confrontation for years, possibly decades. For 3 centuries, the Council had believed they were containing a dangerous but manageable threat. Now they were beginning to realize that they had been deceived. Humanity hadn't been contained at all. They had been preparing, growing stronger in secret while appearing to submit to Council authority. The war that Admiral Chun had warned them about wasn't coming. It had already begun, and the Council was starting from a position of dangerous ignorance about their enemy's true capabilities. The hidden facility on Kepler, 442b, had been humanity's best-kept secret for 37 years. Built inside a hollowed-out asteroid and powered by the radiation of a dying star, Project Prometheus had operated completely outside the knowledge of the Galactic Council. To the outside galaxy, Kepler 442b was just another dead world in an unremarkable system. They had no idea it housed the largest military research and development complex in human space. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood in the main laboratory, watching the holographic displays that showed the real-time status of human forces across the galaxy. The evacuation from Council space had been more successful than anyone had dared hope. Admiral Webb's sacrifice play had bought them the time they needed to get most human civilians to safety, but now came the hard part, keeping them alive. Elena had been the lead scientist on Project Prometheus since its inception. She was one of only 12 humans who knew the full scope of what they had been building in secret while the galaxy believed humanity was being kept weak and dependent. The technologies they had developed here would have shocked even their own people, let alone the Council forces that were currently mobilizing for what they assumed would be a quick and decisive war. "Doctor," called out her assistant, Dr. James Park, "we're receiving priority communications from Admiral Webb's fleet. They're requesting immediate deployment of the Prometheus packages." Elena nodded grimly. The Prometheus packages were weapons of such devastating power that humanity had never intended to use them. They were meant to be deterrents, last resort options for scenarios where human extinction was the alternative. But the Council's actions over the past day had made it clear that they intended to pursue exactly that outcome. The main laboratory was a marvel of human engineering. While the Council had been limiting human access to certain technologies, humanity had been developing alternatives that were not just equivalent, but often superior. The quantum processors that powered the facility's research computers operated on principles that the Galactic Council's own scientists insisted were impossible. The energy generation systems produced more power per unit mass than anything in the known galaxy. But the real breakthrough had come in weapons technology. Humans had taken their understanding of physics in directions that other species had never considered, largely because they had never faced the existential pressure that had driven human innovation. Elena pulled up the tactical display, showing Council forces massing in 12 major systems. The numbers were staggering. Over 3,000 ships representing 47 different species, all united in their determination to crush human resistance once and for all. Intelligence reports suggested that the Council had been planning this operation for years, just waiting for an excuse to implement it. "They really believed we would just roll over and die," Elena muttered, studying the enemy formations. The Council fleet was impressive, but it was also predictable. They were following standard galactic warfare doctrine, the same strategies that had been used for 1,000 years to resolve conflicts between civilized species. Humans had studied those strategies extensively during their 3 centuries as Council members. They had also developed countermeasures that their former allies had never imagined. Dr. Park approached with a datapad showing the latest intelligence reports. The Council has issued a galactic broadcast declaring humanity to be in violation of 43 interstellar treaties. They're claiming legal justification for what they're calling a pacification operation. Elena almost laughed at the euphemism. Pacification, as if genocide could be made acceptable by calling it something else. The Council had made their intentions clear. They didn't just want to defeat humanity militarily. They wanted to eliminate humans as an independent force in galactic politics forever. Any response from the neutral systems? Elena asked. Mixed, Park replied. The hegemony and the free traders are maintaining neutrality, but have closed their borders to both sides. The Outer Rim Confederacy is offering humanitarian support for human refugees, but they won't get involved militarily. Everyone else is either staying silent or actively supporting the Council. Elena had expected as much. Humanity had allies, but none of them were willing to risk Council retaliation by providing direct military support. In practical terms, humanity was facing the rest of galactic civilization alone. But humanity had one advantage that their enemies didn't understand. They had been preparing for this exact scenario since the day they first encountered the Galactic Council. The communication system chimed with an incoming priority message from Admiral Webb. Elena accepted the transmission, and the Admiral's weathered face appeared in the holographic display. His ship showed obvious battle damage, but his expression was determined rather than defeated. Dr. Vasquez, Webb began without preamble, I'm transmitting our current tactical situation. Council forces are massing for a coordinated assault on all remaining human positions. Intelligence suggests they're planning to hit us simultaneously across 17 systems in 72 hours. Elena studied the data as it came through. The Council's plan was ambitious and, if successful, would effectively end human resistance in a single decisive campaign. They were clearly confident in their overwhelming numerical advantage. What's our response capability? She asked. Webb smiled grimly. That depends on what you've got for us, Doctor. My conventional forces can maybe delay them for a week, but we both know how this ends if we fight a traditional war. Elena had been dreading this moment for decades, but she also knew it was inevitable. Humanity had always been on a collision course with the rest of galactic civilization. The only question was whether they would survive the impact. Admiral, I'm authorizing the deployment of Prometheus Package Alpha through Echo. Full tactical specifications are being transmitted to your command staff now. Even Admiral Webb, who had seen humanity's hidden weapons capabilities in action, looked shocked at the scope of what Elena was offering. The Prometheus packages represented the culmination of 37 years of secret research into technologies that the Council had declared impossible or illegal for good reason. Dr. Webb said carefully, some of these weapons, if we deploy them, there's no going back. The galaxy will know what we're capable of. The galaxy is already planning our extinction, Elena replied. Hiding our capabilities hasn't saved us. Maybe it's time to show them exactly what they're trying to destroy. The first Prometheus package was deployed 6 hours later. Admiral Webb selected a Council staging area in the Vega system, where a fleet of over 200 ships was gathering for the assault on human colonies in the Inner Rim. The weapon itself was surprisingly small, no larger than a standard probe. It approached the Council fleet under stealth technology that made it completely invisible to their sensors. When it reached the optimal position at the center of their formation, it activated. The effect was beyond anything the Council forces had ever seen. Instead of an explosion, reality itself seemed to fold in on itself around the device. Space-time distorted in ways that violated everything the galaxy's scientists thought they knew about physics. Ships that had been separated by thousands of kilometers suddenly found themselves occupying the same space, resulting in catastrophic matter-antimatter reactions. Within 30 seconds, an entire Council battle fleet had been reduced to elementary particles. The only evidence of their existence was the exotic radiation signatures that would mark the Vega system as uninhabitable for the next 10,000 years. The second package was deployed against a Council supply depot in the Arcturus sector. This weapon took a different approach, releasing a cloud of self-replicating nanomachines that dismantled everything they touched at the molecular level. The entire facility, along with its escort fleet, simply dissolved into component atoms. News of the attacks spread through Council space faster than their own communication networks. For the first time in galactic history, someone had deployed weapons that could eliminate entire fleets without warning. The psychological impact was almost as devastating as the physical destruction. High Arbiter Zell then convened an emergency session of the Council leadership to address what they were calling the human terror weapons crisis. The chamber was filled with beings who had never before experienced fear for their own survival. For 1,000 years, galactic warfare had been a gentleman's sport with rules and limitations that ensured conflicts remained manageable. Humanity had just changed those rules permanently. This is exactly what we warned about, declared the ethereal council member, its crystalline form flickering with agitated energy. Human aggression knows no bounds. They have developed weapons that threaten the very fabric of space-time itself. Admiral Thexkar, whose own fleet had barely escaped Admiral Webb's assault, presented the tactical analysis. Our intelligence estimates were completely wrong. These humans possess technology that shouldn't be possible. Their weapons systems operate on principles our scientists don't understand. The Vorthack representative's tentacles writhed with barely controlled panic. If they can deploy these weapons without warning, how do we defend against them? Our fleet formations are meaningless if a single device can destroy hundreds of ships simultaneously. High Arbiter Zell then raised itself to its full height, trying to project authority despite the obvious fear in its voice. We cannot allow these atrocities to go unanswered. If humanity believes they can terrorize the galaxy into submission, they have underestimated our resolve. But, privately, Zeldin was beginning to wonder if the Council had made a terrible mistake. They had assumed that 3 centuries of observation and restriction had given them a complete understanding of human capabilities. The events of the past day suggested they had been watching a carefully orchestrated deception. The intelligence reports that came in over the following hours painted an increasingly disturbing picture. Human forces weren't behaving like a desperate enemy fighting for survival. They were conducting coordinated operations across multiple systems with a level of preparation that suggested decades of planning. More troubling were the reports of human technology that seemed to violate fundamental laws of physics. Ships that could appear and disappear without using standard hyperspace technology. Weapons that could destroy targets without any detectable energy signature. Communications systems that operated faster than light speed without using the galactic relay network. The conclusion was inescapable. Humanity had been hiding far more than advanced weapons. They had been concealing an entirely separate technological development path that had progressed far beyond what the rest of galactic civilization had achieved. As the Council leadership struggled to process this reality, Dr. Elena Vasquez was preparing to deploy the most devastating weapon in humanity's arsenal. Prometheus Package Omega was different from the others. It wasn't designed to destroy fleets or facilities. It was designed to end the war completely by demonstrating that humanity possessed the power to destroy worlds. The target she selected was carefully chosen, Nexus Prime itself, the capital world of galactic civilization. Not to destroy it, but to show that they could. Elena knew that what happened next would determine whether humanity survived as an independent species or whether they would be forced to become something else entirely. The galaxy had pushed them beyond their breaking point, and now everyone would discover what humans became when they stopped trying to be civilized. The device was already in hyperspace, racing toward the most heavily defended system in the galaxy. In 18 hours, the Council would face a choice between accepting humanity's terms or watching their capital world disappear from existence. Elena hoped they would choose wisely, because humanity was done making compromises.